With over 20 games in the series, including tons of spin-offs, the Like a Dragon or Yakuza series is one of the most daunting video game series to start. But don't worry, Daddy's home and I've brought the milk. And I've played almost every single one, and I'm definitely not a fraud who hasn't played Yakuza Online or Kenzen. And there always seems to be some sort of confusion when it comes to what game to play first. Also, there's always new games coming out, and hopefully this won't be obsolete in 2 years. Now I'm going to make this pretty easy for some of you already by giving you an answer in the first 30 seconds of this video. If you got one of these bad boys sitting in your depressing backlog of shame, just play that one, you dingus. And if you have multiple games in your library, why are you doing this to yourself? Stop buying games you don't play. Jesus Christ, I am tired of your shit. You need an intervention. But one thing to keep in mind about this series is most games do well as standalone games. I'd say about 85% of each game is original content that doesn't require previous knowledge. Now I'm sure for the rest of you, you're wondering if there's a more detailed answer because of course this is a longer video. Or you're a longtime fan trying to vibe check me and my final answer and just do it already. Just go write your opinion in the comments. I know you've already made up your mind on what the best game to start is with. But quickly before that, I'd like to talk about today's sponsor, Just Have Fun, because that's the most important thing when it comes to this series. Really channel that energy of when you were a kid and didn't think too much about it and you just put a game in your system and played it. This series is one half serious moments of men ripping their shirts off and another half of just funny side activities. So yeah, I hope you just jump into this amazing series and enjoy it as much as I have. But now back to the meat. So for the noobs out there, I want you to answer 2 questions. Are you going into this already thinking you're going to play every game in the series? Because that's actually where I was. I was pretty confident that I wanted to play more than just one game. Or do you have enough life problems and other games to worry about that you just want to try out one and get a feel for the series first? You're going to get 2 completely different answers from me depending on how you answered those. So let's move on. So if you're a latter, I got a couple games you might want to consider. Yakuza 0 is the chronological first game in the series for our leading man, Kiryu Kazuma, and it's without a doubt one of my top 3 favorite games in the series. This game's got everything you could possibly want in a game, and despite for some setup for later games, it has very little baggage, being the start of young Kiryu's journey in Kamurocho. This game's got fun combat, style switching, great story, multiple protagonists, and some of the best side content in the entire series. You just can't go wrong with Yakuza 0. But if you're looking for something slightly more modern that lets you take your time, let me introduce you to one of our other leading men, and that's Ichiban Kasuga in the Yakuza Like a Dragon games, or that series. This is the first turn-based combat game in the series, and it's a great start if you're already into turn-based games in general. It is a much less daunting task to start here and gives you a clear next game to play in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth if you enjoy this one. This game's got an interesting twist on the turn-based combat, a lovable cast of old fogies to drink with, stellar side content, and some of the best really, and one of my personal favorite stories in the entire series. And we're cranking them out now. This is really the one I highly recommend though if you do like other traditional JRPGs. But there is one last game that I think this makes me a little more unique, or I think is an interesting game to talk about as a first game, and that is the first game in the Judgment series, which is just called Judgment. This is a spin-off series following a detective this time called Takayuki Yagami, and it's another action combat-based game with some light detective elements sprinkled in. The Judgment duology, as of right now at least, has no baggage with only 2 games and has pretty much 0 crossover to the mainline games. Judgment, and especially the sequel Lost Judgment, also have some of the best combat and quality of life changes in the entire series. Both stories are also pretty good, and despite the main character not being an actual Yakuza, the story is kind of almost darker in a lot of ways than the main series. So if you're kind of into a darker story, this might be for you. But there's your first answer if you just want a game or 2 to just get right into the series and try it out. Okay, now back to the already dedicated prenatal freaks that already have decided that they want to play pretty much every single game. And now you can play the other games I mentioned as well, no biggie, but if you're already thinking about playing the entire series, there's only 1 or 2 honest answers I can give you, and that's to start with Yakuza 1 for the PS2, the very first game, or the remake Yakuza Kiwami. These 2 games are the true start of the series itself and Kiryu's story, and the rest wouldn't have existed without these. And Yakuza Kiwami is actually where I started back in the day, and now look at me, I'm making videos on YouTube for Yakuza. Now, Yakuza 1 is a very dated PS2 game, but that's actually sometimes, for me at least, the biggest charm of this game, and it's actually quite a hoot and a holler to play this game. And if you have a high tolerance for old game jank, I definitely recommend it just because it's such a unique experience, especially with the English dub.
You're not an asshole. You're a piece of shit. You are so dead, bitch.
The world and combat exploration is pretty old, but this also means you won't run into the inevitable wall of jank that is Yakuza 3 as you continue the series. See, if you just start with Yakuza 1 and go to 2 and then 3, it's a smooth and nice progression of the series just getting better. If you go from Yakuza Kiwami 2 on a fancy schmancy My Neighbor's Name is Nancy Dragon engine to Yakuza 3, you might be a little bit disappointed. Now, it's not like it's impossible, but the transition is just a little jarring, and I'm coming from experience, this is what I did, so I kind of know. But I don't think it's going to stop anyone, just letting you to be aware of that. Because starting with Kiwami is also a pretty great choice. And while I'm not 100% confident, I think Kiwami will actually be a good starting point if you happen to try out this new Yakuza TV show that's coming. I hope this doesn't date it and that show's actually terrible or something. But Kiwami 1 has similar style switching in combat and lovable characters like in the Yakuza 0, which also coincidentally makes Yakuza 0 a great follow-up game if you want to try that out too, before jumping into say Kiwami 2. But this is again the real start of Kiryu's story and where everything builds off of after this one. Alright, now we're in a fun part of the video where I tell you about all the other games and why you shouldn't play them, but you can inevitably ignore me if you're an anarchist. Yakuza 3 or Blockaza is one of the most infamous and frankly is one of the ones I see a lot of people dislike in the series. However, the opening hours are unironically some of the most important for getting the full impact of later and more recent titles, and I just kind of find that funny. The last two games have made this game almost essential if you want to max out your tier duck levels. And Yakuza 4 and 5 are also really good entries, especially 5 if you like side content. And these were actually two of the first games that introduced multiple protagonists, Akiyama for life, and damn, I'll miss your lovable ass Shinada. And Yakuza 6, well, you can go fucking do it if you want to play that as your first game, but like, it's called Yakuza 6 for a reason. And if you go play this before some of the other games, I think you'll find it just a tad bit confusing. There's also a ton of Japanese-only games which are okay and have fan translations if you're really freaky and you want to try out Ryoga Gotoku, Kenzen, Ishin, Likeadragon Ishin, the remake of Ishin, which is cool I guess if you're into that old samurai weeb shit. There's also a couple PSP games called the Kurohyo 1 and 2, probably butchered that, but both games have pretty good stories, but I think the time's long past for these to be the first you try out. But I thought I'd mention it, be just trying to appease some of the more judgmental Yakuza freaks who would freak out if I didn't mention these two games. There's also the Fist of the North Star game, which that's actually another one I haven't played. But I mean, if you're a Fist of the North Star fan, I'm guessing you probably did play this already. If you haven't, then consider you a bad fan. And we're almost done getting through all these games, but there's also Likeadragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, has one of the best villains in the entire series, and I have a spoiler review for it if you ever do play it, but just please erase this game from your memory for right now. But no, seriously, it's a good-ass game, but like with Infinite Wealth, you'll just get much more impact of this game if you play a few other games in the series before you do this, or at least just get a YouTube recap or something before you go into playing this game. Just trust me. But that's really it. There's not a terrible game in this series in my opinion, but if you're still confused, just again, play Yakuza. But honestly, the real hard point will be finding the time to play these games, because we all know we all have too many games. And if nothing else, try out Yakuza Dead Souls, the zombie slaying action game on the PS3. Definitely peak Yakuza, and who needs frames?